Hello, PEI. Thanks for tuning in. Today's episode may run a little longer as there is just too much info, too many nuggets to just gloss over, but it will be worth the listen, whether you are in your car or just taking a break from your day. We all wonder at the people around us. Where did everyone come from? When did we go from a humble little island to a busy Canadian population center? Before getting into it, a big thanks to Mike Montague of Remax Charlottetown, who, while in his own vehicle waiting for the lights to change recently, began wondering at some of the questions we were tackling here today. So today, we are taking a deep dive into PEI's roller coaster population history. And the numbers we are about to explore, they just tell a genuinely wild story.
They really do. The data paints a picture of this really dramatic, almost like a sweeping three-act play.
Okay, I like that framing.
Yeah, so Act 1 is this massive agrarian 19th century boom.
Right.
Then Act 2 is just a brutal 40-year bleed where the province simply couldn't hold on to its people.
Yeah, just lost them.
Exactly. And then Act 3, the final act, is this unprecedented modern explosion that has, fundamentally rewired the local real estate market, the post-secondary schools, and really the entire cultural identity of the island.
Yeah. And before we can really look at the person standing next to us in the grocery store today and understand how they got here, we need to understand that historical baseline.
Right, the starting point.
Yeah, we need to look at the ghosts of those empty rural farms. The dossier points out that for roughly 2,000 years, the Micmac called the island Epiquick.
Yes.
And their pre-contact population was, well, it was remarkably small, just around 300 people.
It is really worth sitting with the sheer scale of that timeline.
Yeah.
300 people over 2 millennia. So everything we look at now, the real estate bidding wars, the traffic gridlock on University Avenue.
Oh, traffic, yeah.
Right. The sprawling subdivisions. All of it is happening on a piece of land that supported a tiny, tiny fraction of its current population for thousands of years.
Right.
And even European colonization started incredibly slow. Like by 1748, you only had about 700 people on the island.
Wow.
Yeah. The first major demographic shock didn't hit until 1755.
Okay, so what happened then?
Well, Britain expelled the Acadians from Nova Scotia.
Oh, right, the expulsion.
Exactly. And thousands of them were pushed onto the island almost overnight. So in this very short window, the population spikes to around 4,500.
That's a huge jump. And from there, the province just starts filling up, right? It's Scottish, Irish, and English settlers.
Yeah, exactly.
So by 1850, we are nearing 63,000 people. And it just climbs steadily, driven by these massive farming families, until it hits this historic peak in 1891.
The big one.
Yeah, the census that year recorded exactly 109,078 people.
Yep.
But then the bottom just falls out entirely.
It completely collapses.
Yeah, between 1901 and 1931, the population just drops. I was reading the notes on this outmigration in the dossier, and the best way I can think to describe the mechanics of it is it's like trying to feed a growing family with one single pizza.
Oh, that's a great analogy.
Right. So you have a large pizza, and it feeds the first generation totally fine. But then the next generation comes along, and you have to slice that same pizza into smaller pieces.
Because the farm isn't getting any bigger.
Exactly. The generation after that needs a slice, so you divide it again. And eventually, you are slicing a pizza until the slices are just physically too small to sustain anyone.
Yeah, you just can't survive on it.
Right. And that is what the generational subdivision of PEI's family farms did to the population.
And when those farm slices got too small to survive on, there was no economic backup plan.
Not at all.
No, PEI simply had no industrial base to absorb all that excess labor. So young people who couldn't carve a living out of a tiny fraction of a family farm, they had to leave just to survive.
Wow.
They headed to the mill towns of Massachusetts, the timber camps in New Brunswick, or out to the booming harvests in the prairies.
Just anywhere there was work.
Anywhere. And the historical sources describe this very specific pattern. They call it two-step emigration.
Okay, how does that work?
So a young person would leave the rural family farm and first move into Charlottetown or Summerside.
Right, hoping to find wage labor. But when they couldn't find steady work there, or, the wages simply weren't enough to live on, they would take the second step and leave the province entirely.
Right.
And then former islanders, sending letters and money back home, essentially built the network that pulled the next wave of younger siblings off the island.
Wow. And the sheer irony of this is just heavy.
Oh, absolutely. What's fascinating here is The exact same island that couldn't hold on to its own children for 4 straight decades is now frantically trying to build houses for the entire world.
Yeah, it's wild to think about. So how did that bleeding actually stop? Because, I mean, dropping all the way down to around 88,000 people by 1931, that's catastrophic.
It really is.
Something had to turn the tide, right?
Well, it actually took a global economic collapse to pause the outmigration.
The Great Depression hit, and the outside world simply stopped offering opportunity. When Boston and the prairies didn't have jobs to offer anymore, PEI stopped losing its youth to them.
Wow. So they just had nowhere to go.
Exactly. It was a stabilization born out of pure necessity. And then World War II brought some military spending and wartime industry to Atlantic Canada shortly after, which, kept people employed locally.
Right.
But the structural turning point for actually keeping people on the island long term was a massive federal provincial overhaul in 1969.
Okay.
It was called the PEI Comprehensive Development Plan.
Yeah, I've heard of the 1969 plan, but how does a government document actually physically keep people from packing their bags and moving away?
Well, the plan actively shifted the entire economic foundation of the province.
How so?
So instead of letting small, inefficient farms fail slowly over generations, the government bought up marginal land and modernized the agricultural sector with, better equipment and education. They consolidated the rural schools, they paved the dirt roads, and most importantly, they deliberately concentrated new economic activity and government services in Charlottetown and Summerside.
Right, to create jobs there.
Exactly, to create a modern, educated middle class at home. The entire focus of the plan was retention, convincing the people who were born on the island that they could actually build a prosperous life without having to leave it.
Right. But going from a desperate retention strategy to becoming the fastest growing province in the entire country, that is a massive leap.
Oh, huge.
It's a total paradigm shift. I mean, from 2000 to 2016, the data shows growth was a slow, steady trickle.
Very slow.
But then, between 2016 and 2023, the world clearly discovers the island. The 2021 census shows an 8% increase in just 5 years.
It's incredible.
And between 2020 and 2024, the province added over 22,000 residents.
Yeah.
I mean, that is more population growth in 4 short years than in the previous 20 years combined.
Yeah, and by early 2026, the population had actually crossed 181,000.
Wow.
It is a staggering acceleration for a place that spent the vast majority of its history just watching its numbers shrink.
Yeah, absolutely. But wait, I need to challenge this rosy view of explosive growth for a second.
Sure.
Because the data in the dossier really threw me. If the natural population change, which is, births minus deaths, has been negative for 7 of the last 8 years, aren't we just masking a dying local demographic by importing a new one? Isn't this massive influx more of an economic Band-Aid rather than a real cure for the province's future?
Well, the demographic reality is stark, and the data certainly doesn't shy away from it. PEI, on its own, is not producing enough births to replace the people it loses to age.
Right.
So every single conversation about PEI's population growth is, at its core, a conversation about migration.
Okay.
But this influx is doing much more than just masking a decline. It is fundamentally rewiring the demographic profile of the province.
How so? Is it the age of the people arriving?
Exactly. The mechanism behind this growth is highly age-specific. Roughly 90% of the international immigrants and non-permanent residents arriving in PEI are under the age of 40.
90%, wow.
Yeah. So instead of aging out, the province is actually getting younger. The median age was 44 in 2021, which, was higher than the national average.
Right.
But by 2025, the median age had dropped to 41. That represents 9 straight years of demographic decline in age.
That's amazing. And, if you are driving down University Avenue right now or walking through downtown Charlottetown, this is exactly why the storefronts look completely different than they did in 2010.
Yeah, it's very visible.
You aren't imagining it, right?
Yeah.
The street-level texture of the city is completely transformed. The dossier cites a piece on Charlottetown that notes Mandarin has actually overtaken French as the second most spoken language.
Wow.
With Punjabi right behind it.
That's a huge shift.
It is. For a province whose entire identity post-Confederation was built heavily on a French-English bilingual heritage, this is a massive reordering of what island culture actually sounds like.
Absolutely.
You see it in the explosion of Asian grocers, Indian bakeries, and the new Islamic and Sikh community spaces popping up.
Yeah, and the Filipino community is a really prime example of how this structural shift actually occurred on the ground.
Okay.
Their story is deeply tied to the island's economic survival. Many Filipino newcomers initially arrived as temporary foreign workers,
Right.
and they were specifically tied to labor market impact assessments, or LMIAs.
Right, right.
And an LMIA is basically this really strict federal mechanism where a business has to mathematically prove they literally cannot find a single local worker for a job.
Oh.
And only then are they permitted to hire internationally. So for years, these workers were brought in to fill brutal labor shortages in the seafood and fish processing plants in western PEI.
Right, so they were stepping in to do the exhausting, essential jobs that the shrinking and aging local workforce just wasn't filling anymore.
Exactly. But what started as a temporary labor solution slowly evolved into permanent community building. Well, over time, many of these workers transitioned to permanent residency through the Provincial Nominee Program, or the PNP.
The PMP, right.
Yeah, the province used the PNP to specifically target the critical skill gaps they desperately needed to fill. So not just in fish plants, but in healthcare, construction, and agriculture.
That makes total sense.
Yeah, and once they secured permanent residency, these workers sponsored their families, bought homes, and they stayed to build their lives. Today, they're running small businesses, staffing the local hospitals, and really deeply weaving themselves into the cultural fabric of the province.
Yeah, it's incredible. Because we are trying to fit a 21st century population boom into 20th century infrastructure.
Yeah.
We've poured a record number of new people onto a physically small island,
Yep.
which directly connects to Mike Montague's world in real estate.
Yeah.
Like, where do they all live?
Right, where do you put everyone?
Exactly. When math meets reality here, things get genuinely punishing. For 50 years, PEI added 1.2 new residents for every new housing unit started.
Okay.
But by 2024, that ratio almost doubled. We are looking at 2 new residents for every single housing start.
Wow. The construction industry simply couldn't scale up fast enough to meet the demand.
Right.
I mean, the year 2024 actually saw the highest number of construction starts in more than 50 years.
Really?
Yeah, nearly 1,700 units were built.
Wow.
But it still wasn't anywhere near enough to house the sheer influx of people arriving.
It's like a terrifying game of musical chairs.
Yeah, that's exactly what it's like.
The music never stops.
Mm-hmm.
But they keep adding players to the game way faster than the local carpenters can physically build new chairs to sit on.
Right.
And when that happens, people panic and overpay just to secure a seat. The financial reality of that squeeze hits hard. The benchmark price of a home practically doubled in just 8 years.
It's hard to fathom.
Right. We are talking about jumping from around $150,000 in 2013 to nearly $298,000 by 2021.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, the rental vacancy rate essentially flatlined, bottoming out at a microscopic 0.7%.
And you know what makes that price doubling so visceral for the people living there?
What's that?
It's the wage gap. Median household income barely crept up during that same 8-year window.
Right.
Wage growth completely failed to pace with the exploding real estate market, which leaves local earners at a massive disadvantage.
Yeah, and if you are a senior or part of a growing family listening to this, you are feeling this in your daily life.
Oh, absolutely.
This housing squeeze is exactly why adult children and aging parents are moving back in together.
Yeah.
Like, multi-generational homes are making a massive comeback because building a new house or buying a separate property is mathematically out of reach for so many people right now.
Yeah.
You aren't imagining the struggle. The macroeconomic data confirms your daily experience.
The squeeze is very real, and it's very painful for a lot of residents. But if we connect this to the bigger picture, there is a silver lining in the data.
Okay, what's the silver line?
Well, even after that historic massive run-up in real estate prices, PEI housing is still roughly 40% below the national average. The fundamental value gap that draws people from the mainland to the island still exists. And for a local senior looking to downsize a long-held family home, they are selling into a market worth triple what it was 20 years ago.
That's true.
That represents a massive boost in equity for the people who weathered the leaner decades and maintain their properties.
Right, and that value gap makes sense as a draw. But if it wasn't just relatively cheap houses, what was the primary engine pulling so many young international newcomers to PEI in the first place?
That's the real question.
Right, and more importantly, why did this explosive growth hit an absolute wall in 2024?
Well, the true engines driving this demographic shift weren't just the housing prices, they were the post-secondary institutions.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, UPEI and Holland College essentially evolved from traditional educational schools into literal immigration and labor infrastructure.
And the enrollment numbers show exactly that.
They do.
International students grew to make up over 35% of the total student body at UPEI and about 30% at Holland College.
Yeah.
But how does an international student actually become a permanent solution to a local labor shortage in a hospital or on a construction site? Like, how does that jump happen?
It happens through a highly effective, perfectly designed funnel called the Study and Stay pathway.
Study and stay.
Yeah. The mechanism works like this. An international student arrives for a 2-year diploma or a 4-year degree, and because they live, study, and often work part-time locally during those critical years, they deeply integrate into the community.
Right.
Upon graduating, that local education experience gives them preferential fast-tracked points in the provincial nominee program.
Oh, I see.
So it directly incentivized young, educated people to put down roots on the island rather than taking their expensive new degrees straight to Toronto or Vancouver.
It's a brilliant loop when you think about it.
It really is.
You bring in international tuition revenue to fund the schools, and you pump out young, skilled workers to build the local houses and staff the local clinics.
Exactly.
But then the federal policy hammer comes down.
Yeah, it did.
Starting in early 2024, the federal government placed incredibly strict caps on national study permit issuance.
And it's important to note this wasn't a policy aimed at Prince Edward Island.
Right.
The federal government was responding to severe housing and infrastructure crises in Canada's largest cities, like Toronto and Vancouver. They clamped down on the total number of international students allowed into the country, specifically to cool off those major urban centers.
But the local fallout in PEI has been harsh.
Very harsh.
Yeah, by losing that intake pipeline, UPEI saw its first-year international enrollment drop by roughly 50%.
Wow.
And Holland College is projecting an 85% drop by September 2026.
That is massive.
The real-world impact locally is suspended educational programs, dozens of staff layoffs, and UPEI actually hiking domestic tuition just to offset the massive loss of international revenue.
Right.
So what does this all mean for the island? Like, did PEI suddenly lose its appeal? Or is this entire cool down just collateral damage from a national housing crisis policy?
The data strongly suggests it is entirely collateral damage.
Okay.
Yeah. PEI hasn't lost its charm, its community safety, or its underlying value proposition to newcomers. The structural infrastructure that makes the island appealing, so the provincial nominee program, the local settlement pathways, the community support networks, all of that is still fully intact and functional.
Right.
What we're seeing right now is a cyclical policy trough driven by Ottawa. It is a temporary throttling of the pipeline, not a permanent retreat or a failure of the island's appeal.
Well, that completely flips the narrative.
Doesn't it?
Yeah, when you step back and look at the whole timeline, the grand reversal here is just beautiful.
It really is.
The island's defining story for the entire 20th century was that it simply could not hold on to its own people.
Yeah.
It watched generation after generation pack up and leave for greener pastures. Today, even in the middle of a cooled real estate market, a housing squeeze, and a throttled immigration policy, PEI is writing a completely different story.
Yeah.
It's a story of people who are here because they deliberately chose to be here.
And it is a profound shift in agency. The island is no longer a place you have to leave to find opportunity. For tens of thousands of people around the world, it is the ultimate destination.
And I think that really redefines what it means to be an islander.
I agree.
You know, being built by people from somewhere else, whether that was the Mi'kmaq first,
Yeah.
then the Acadians, the Scottish, the Irish, and now the Chinese, Indian, and Filipino communities. It isn't a threat to PEI's culture.
Not at all.
In fact, evolving by welcoming people from across the sea is the most historically island thing possible.
Absolutely. And this raises a fascinating thought to leave you with as you mull over these numbers and go about your day.
Okay, let's hear.
When we look back 50 years from now at the children of this current wave of newcomers, what will the traditional island accents sound like, and what new traditions will we be fiercely protecting as uniquely PEI?
Oh, wow. That is the perfect question to end on. It's so important that we land on an optimistic, forward-looking note without glossing over the real housing affordability and post-secondary funding challenges the data reveals. Close at thanking Mike Montague of RE/MAX Charlottetown for his hard work in putting this one together for the Hello PEI listeners.